Why Mike Tyson's peekaboo was a death sentence. Most people think Mike Tyson was just a brawler, a street kid with a big punch and a bad attitude. They couldn't be more wrong. When you stood across from Mike in the mid-'80s, you weren't looking at a man. You were looking at a glitch in the system. You'd throw a jab, and he was gone. You'd throw a cross, and he was already under your chin. Then, darkness. It was called the peekaboo, a style forged in a dark, dusty gym in Catskill by a mad genius named Cus D'Amato. It wasn't just a stance. It was a death sentence for every heavyweight who thought they were safe behind a long reach. Today, we're going under the hood. We're breaking down the physics of the most terrifying style to ever grace the ring. This is why, when Mike tucked his chin, the fight was already over. Cus D'Amato was a ghost, an old strategist living in the shadows of upstate New York, far away from the bright lights and the corrupt promoters of the city. He didn't want a boxer who followed the rules. He wanted a revolution. He found it in a 13-year-old boy from Brownsville named Mike. Mike was wide, powerful, and carried a lifetime of pain in his fists. But he was short for a heavyweight. In the boxing world, height is supposed to be king. Reach is supposed to be the law. Cus knew that if Mike fought like a traditional boxer, he'd be picked apart by the giants. So they went to work in that dim, freezing gym in Catskill. They didn't build a style. They built a reach killer. The peekaboo was born out of necessity. Hands held high, gloves glued to the cheekbones, chin tucked deep into the chest. To the uneducated eye, it looked like a defensive shell. To Cus, it was a loaded spring. Cus taught Mike that the shortest distance between 2 points wasn't a straight line. It was a slip and a pivot. He turned Mike into a moving target that lived inside the opponent's guard. While other trainers were teaching kids to jab and move away, Cus was teaching Mike to jab and move in. He turned Mike's height from a weakness into a weapon. By the time Mike was 16, he wasn't just a kid who could punch. He was a technical nightmare that looked like a street fight. It was the perfect marriage of an old man's brain and a young man's ferocity. The world saw a monster, but in that gym, it was pure science. Most heavyweights move like statues. They are tall, upright, and predictable. Mike Tyson was a pendulum. He didn't just walk forward, he vibrated. This was the slip and dip in its purest form. If you've ever tried to hit a shadow in a dark room, you know what it felt like to stand across from 1986 Tyson. He moved his head inches, just enough to make your best jab graze his ear. And the moment you missed, that was your funeral. Cus D'Amato developed a secret language for this violence, the number system. He didn't scream, "throw a hook." He screamed, 7-4-2. Each number was a specific, devastating blow. This system allowed Mike to punch without thinking. It was muscle memory turned into a weapon. The peekaboo allowed Mike to load his legs like heavy-duty springs. He wasn't punching with his arms. He was punching with the rotation of the earth. He would dip to the right, load that right hip, and explode upward with the number 7, that terrifying upward jab. Or he'd slip left and bury a number 4 into your liver before you could even reset your feet. It was a rhythm. Slip, slip, pivot, explode. By the time you realized he wasn't in front of you anymore, you were already looking at the arena lights. It was the physics of a car crash delivered with the precision of a surgeon. He didn't just beat men. He dismantled them piece by piece by living in the one place they couldn't hit, the inside. The peekaboo turned the ring into a claustrophobic cage where there was nowhere to hide and no time to breathe. Boxing is 90% mental. But when you fought Mike Tyson, it was 100% psychological warfare. The peekaboo wasn't just a physical shield, it was a mental meat grinder. Imagine being a world-class athlete, a man who has spent his whole life being the strongest person in every room. Now, imagine throwing your best, fastest punch at a man's face and hitting nothing but empty air, every single time. That is when the panic starts. It's a cold, sinking feeling in your gut. Your arms start to feel like lead. Your lungs begin to burn because you're holding your breath, waiting for the counterpunch you know is coming but can't see. Against Tyson, hesitation was suicide, and the peekaboo was designed to make you hesitate. Mike kept his face hidden behind those gloves. You couldn't see his jaw. You couldn't see his chin. Most importantly, you couldn't see his expression. You couldn't tell if he was tired. You couldn't tell if you had hurt him. All you saw were two dark, intense eyes peering over the leather, watching. Your every mistake like a predator watching a wounded animal. It was like being hunted by something that didn't feel pain. This style stripped away an opponent's confidence layer by layer. By the third round, most men weren't trying to win anymore. They were just trying to survive the next 3 minutes. They would stop throwing punches because they were terrified of the tax Mike would make them pay for missing. That was the true death sentence. Before the knockout blow ever landed, the peekaboo had already stolen your spirit. It turned the ring into a house of mirrors, where Mike was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. You weren't just fighting a man. You were fighting the realization that you were completely, utterly helpless. And that is a weight no man can carry for long. So, why did the death sentence vanish? Why don't we see the peekaboo in today's heavyweight division? The answer is simple, but it's brutal. The style is too hard. It requires the legs of a champion and the soul of a monk. Most heavyweights today are 6'6" business machines. They want to stay at range, lean on their opponents, and win on points. They don't want to do the work that the peekaboo demands. To fight like Mike, you have to be in a constant state of motion. You have to be okay with the friction. You have to be willing to slip 1,000 punches just to land one. When Cus D'Amato died, the architect was gone. And when Mike's discipline began to rot, the engine of the style stalled. The peekaboo isn't something you can do halfway. If you aren't 100% committed, it's a dangerous way to live. Without the mentor and without the fire, the style became a relic. Today's boxing is more athletic, maybe. It's more polished, sure, but it's not as honest. The peekaboo was the last time we saw a style built purely for the kill. It was a language of violence that only two men truly spoke. And they took the dictionary with them. When we watch those old tapes now, we aren't just looking at highlights. We're looking at a ghost. We're looking at the last time a heavyweight used geometry to dismantle a giant. The peekaboo didn't just retire with Mike, it died with him. And that's why the sport feels a little quieter and a lot less dangerous than it did in 1988. The peekaboo wasn't just a boxing technique. It was a shield for a boy whom the world had tried to break. For a kid from the streets of Brownsville, it was the ultimate, "You can't touch me." Today, we see flashy knockouts and big money fights, but we rarely see that kind of soul. We rarely see a style that demands every ounce of a man's focus, rhythm, and courage. When you look back at those grainy 80s tapes, don't just look at the fall of the opponent. Look at the feet. Look at the head movement. Look at the science. Mike Tyson proved that a man's greatest disadvantage can be turned into his most lethal weapon if he has the right teacher and the heart to endure the fire. The death sentence might be a lost art, but the memory of it still keeps the boxing world awake at night. Now, I want to hear from you. In your opinion, which fighter came the closest to surviving the peekaboo nightmare? Or was Mike truly in a league of his own? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you want more deep dives into the legends of the golden era, hit that subscribe button. We're keeping the old school alive, one round at a time. Until next time, stay dangerous.